Welcome to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, a Full Mind production. At Full Mind, our vision is to ensure every child has access to an exceptional education. Each episode, we will be joined by pathfinders within and around the education space who are bringing about transformational change on behalf of deserving students. I am your host, Hayley Spira Bauer. Welcome back to the Learning Can't Wait podcast, everyone. It is always a special day when we get to talk about work that is happening in schools, but it is even more special when we get to do it with the leaders themselves that are doing this work and the organizations supporting it. So I'm thrilled to introduce everybody today to Dr. Liz Chu, the Executive Director of CPRL, the Center for Public Research and Leadership at Columbia University. Welcome, Liz.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
And Liz, I'm thrilled to have you, and I'm especially grateful that you brought along two colleagues of yours. We have Jason Kamras, the Superintendent of Richmond School District in Virginia, and dad to Ezra and Akiva. Welcome, Jason. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
And last but certainly not least, we have Celeste Terry. And this is the introduction that we prompted with here. The superintendent to the best district, the entire world, District 18 in New York City, and a new mom. Welcome, Celeste. I will name that I'm not necessarily playing favorites because I think there is great work happening across the country, but I'm super thrilled that we get to dive into the work that's happening in each of your districts alongside CPRL. But let's start off by having everybody tell us, how did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself? I'm going to go backwards now. Celeste, I'll start with you.
So the funny thing is, I never wanted to be a teacher. I didn't want to be an educator. I wanted to be a lawyer. I saw Law and Order and I decided that's what I was going to be. But I had some few traumatic experiences in school and teachers just did not notice. But the one person who did notice was my mother. And I think I've always said to myself, I want to be the type of teacher I never had, right? And so when I came into education, I really want to be that person. I want to be an advocate. The reason why I wasn't a lawyer was because I had the amazing opportunity to volunteer when I was a senior at Howard University at a school, and it completely changed my life. And so the reason why I shifted every single thing was because of that volunteer experience, the fact that I didn't really have a transformative teacher in my life, and just the amazing, amazing, amazing love of my mom.
Can I just ask Celeste, where did you work in DC?
So I was at Northwest. There was this community center called Sojourners, and that's where I worked. It was right around the corner from my dorm. And literally, I'm telling you, I was like, I'm not going to be a teacher. I don't want to be a teacher. And I went in there and I was really good. And people were like, you should be a teacher. My father wasn't too happy though, because in his mind, we have a daughter who's going to be an engineer and I was going to be the lawyer. So for a long time, my family wasn't too happy.
Your point, though, reflects a lot of the current research on current teachers who do not want their kids to be teachers, which is a topic that we can definitely get into in this conversation because I think it is relevant to the type of supports we provide our teachers in the classroom and how well they feel equipped to do the job, which nobody knows that better than a leader like both of you. But we'll get to that in a moment. Celeste, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing your experience and how you came to be. Jason, I'll go to you next. Same question. How did you come to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Well, my mom actually was a teacher for a number of years in Bed-Stuy in New York, many, many years ago. Yes,
Wait,
Celeste.
Bed-Stuy?
Yes.
I was a principal for 11 years in Bed-Stuy.
I think my mom predates you though a little bit. So, teaching was always on the mind, but I think it really comes down to sort of a family story. My grandfather, my mom's dad, when he was growing up in the 20s and 30s, like many Jewish boys of the era, his mother wanted him to be a doctor, and so he studied real hard, did great in school, and graduated the top of his class in college. But at the time, there were quotas for the number of Jews who were allowed to go to medical school, and so he wasn't able to go. And he was so passionate about being in healthcare that he decided to go to dental school, which didn't have quotas. And he went, he got his degree. And then just as that was finishing up, the quotas for medical school eased. And so he reapplied, got in, went to medical school, graduated top of his class, and ended up being a physician in New York City for 50 years. And that story really always stuck with me as part of the kind of family lore, in that, education has this incredible way of holding people back when it is not equitably distributed, and it has an incredible way of lifting people up when it is. And so that always really just struck with me, and I didn't know what that would mean, but then when I got into the classroom and started to see that play out with my own students in DC, um, I think each year I was like, you know what, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so, as they say, the rest is history.
I love that this opportunity to introduce yourself is bringing you and Celeste closer together with crossover from geographic roots, but
Yes.
also a
And
lot.
Celeste, I lived on 11th and V in
I was
DC.
on 16th Street in Northwest, Cambridge, not Cambridge Heights, Adams Morgan, the whole
Okay,
Adams,
yeah. I
across the street
also
from
lived
Malcolm
on,
X Park.
yes, I also lived on 16th and Swan,
Oh,
just down the street.
we were kind of close.
Yeah, not bad. My wife taught at Raymond Elementary,
I know
which,
where that's at.
yeah, so
This is too good. This is
there
too
we
good.
go.
And we were in DC when DC was rough. Like DC, that part of DC is not rough anymore.
Yes, it's very different. It's very bougie now.
Yeah, very bougie.
Yes.
All right, well, Liz, we saved you for last, and I did that for a reason. Can you please tell us how you came to be the personal and professional version of yourself?
Sure. Well, it sounds like all of us share New York City as part of our story, so maybe that's where I'll start. That's where I headed off after college to be a teacher. This was back in the Bloomberg Klein era when so much change was happening in the city in the early 2000s. And I first taught at a middle school as it was being phased out and closed. And then I taught in a high school in District 9 in the South Bronx as it was being opened up as one of the many new small schools put into a big building that was being broken up into lots of smaller high schools for kids. And that experience, one was incredibly fulfilling because I love teaching. I love working with kids, and those years as a teacher remain a highlight of my career and obviously have stuck with me because I continue to be so deeply engaged in education today. But the other thing that it showed me is that change is possible in education, and that it's really, really hard to do well at scale with any sort of consistency. And so from the classroom, I went back to graduate school. And at graduate school, I found CPRL, the center where I work today. I was actually one of the first students in the program in its inaugural cohort, learning how to make structural change across big systems. And I would say that that experience as a graduate student obviously had a huge impression on me because it was the first time where I encountered a group of thinkers from all across many disciplines, law, business, policy, education, data science, who are coming together to try and figure out how can we remake our public institutions so that they deliver on the promise that they were intended to deliver for all kids, families, communities in our country. And so I caught the bug. I've been there now for over a decade, and really excited to be at a place where I get the opportunity to work with amazing leaders like the two superintendents here this morning.
I appreciate the story that you've woven there. I also have to say my first job in schools was in District 9 also. And now we're done. Now we're done. We've done the whole New York City connection. I love that though. So Liz, I'm going to keep the microphone with you for a second. Your work at CPRL has been really impactful, especially around this project, All Systems Go, which is lifting up over 12 districts that are actually moving the needle in reading and math at a time where the country is stagnating. In the news cycle, it tends to focus on everything that's broken in education. What made CPRL decide to focus on this and tell this story about what's working right now?
Well, you hit on it with the question itself, which is that this is a moment when our public schools and other public institutions are under constant attack. And as these institutions are under constant fire, it seems like what we're being fed every single day are all of the stories about what is going wrong. And yet, with our work nationally, what we see is that there are many systems that are showing forward what's possible for kids and schools and communities. And as these institutions are under attack and having to make hard choices about what to keep doing, what to take on, what to improve upon, we thought it was time to tell some stories about what's really working well for kids so that more systems can do what's working well and can stop doing the things that aren't helping kids achieve the outcomes that we want them to achieve.
And how does this work, Celeste, look in New York City? You're in the largest school system in the entire country. How is it that District 18 is embracing this high quality instructional material, implementing it with fidelity? What's the like change agent here, would you say?
I think two things. I have the best teachers and principals, and I invest in them. And I think that investment in professional learning, having a great professional development partner, and being on the ground so that we learn, we implement it slowly but learned quickly. And I think everything in improvement science says that you got to really make sure that when you're doing something new, especially when you're putting a new curriculum in, right? That you have to make people, you have to get people to really want to do this. And I know for me, I had literally read a lot of Facebook posts about the new curriculum I was putting in, and there were a lot of teachers who hated it, right? And I knew that if I didn't want to be the new Facebook post, that it was some things I need to do differently. And so I think it's really about rallying the troops and really being able to have a strong why, and then making sure connected to that why is you providing some really amazing supports.
And did you face pushback at first when you were implementing, or do you feel like the proactive actions you took were actually able to overcome some of those objections that you saw over on Facebook?
I think the biggest pushback first came from myself, because we had already implemented a curriculum 2 to 3 years ago, and we're not happy about it. And so for me, I was like, do I really have the credibility to do this again? Is this a really smart move to do again? I think, but being transparent, um, we really didn't have that much pushback. I think part of it was my transparency. And I think because we started with the Willing First, we piloted this curriculum the year before and just asked for volunteers. I think for me, that was the way to do it. So I think the biggest pushback was for myself, whether or not, we had did I have the stamina to do it? And was I going to be okay with the pushback? But really and truly, I think because people know that I'm very honest about where I'm right and where I'm wrong, and because we did a lot of that work the year before, we didn't really experience that much pushback.
We have like kind of dove right into the leadership angle of how you made sure that this was a successful program. We obviously haven't yet touched on the outcomes. Liz, can I back up for a second? Can you overview a little bit for us? What is the All Systems Go story? Why are we talking about this? What was the program and how did it look? And Celeste now has painted a beautiful picture for us, how it looks when it's successful. Can you talk a little bit about the high level for us and then we'll continue diving in?
Yes, I'm happy to. And so when we looked across the country about districts that were beating the odds or achieving really meaningful gains, we basically saw a playbook for what those districts had in common. And when I say beating the odds or achieving remarkable gains, I think it is worth calling out what's happening in both of the two superintendents' districts. So Richmond stuck out to us because between 2021 and 2024, we saw a 24 percentage point increase in proficiency in K-2 students, which is really, really, really quite remarkable. In Superintendent Terry's district in D18 in New York City, over a single school year from 24 to 25, they saw a 24 percentage point increase in reading proficiency among fifth graders. 24 percentage points. That's remarkable. They saw an 11 percentage point increase in reading proficiency across elementary and middle school students. And they saw a 22 percentage point increase in reading proficiency among Black fifth graders. So they're reaching all of the students in the district at really high levels at tremendous rates of increase. And so when we're looking across these districts, as you said, we picked out 12 across the country that are getting these really impressive gains. We saw a similar playbook. And we decided to name that playbook Reach Higher Together because this is a collective effort to do better for kids. And it turns out that that playbook really fits into REACH, the acronym that we use. So they're doing 5 things together. The first, the R, is resource. In these districts, they are looking for supplying all educators with shared high quality learning materials, high quality curriculum that can be used in all classes, that are shared across all adults so that they can work together to make sure they're coordinating the learning experiences for students. Once you have those resources, the resources are not enough. In fact, Superintendent Terry was just speaking about the fact that they had a curriculum before. It's not enough to just have a tool in the hands of adults. You have to make sure that that is the right tool and that the adults are prepared to use that tool to the best effect. So the second, E, equip, is about providing the training required to help educators use that tool well to meet all students' needs. With the resources, with the training, the next thing you got to do is A, assess and adjust. So in all of these systems, teachers are implementing, educators are implementing, and they are constantly monitoring what is working and continuously improving based on what is not. They're assessing and adjusting, not just at the whole district level. It's really amazing to hear these districts talk about how they're lifting up and spreading effective practices across teachers, which is possible because the curriculum is shared. They're also assessing and adjusting for each individual child's particular learning needs or each classroom's set of learning needs. A lot of important screener tools and formative and interim assessments come into play here. The fourth is cohere. So as I was saying, we like the idea of Reach Higher Together because it is a collective effort. And here we're not just talking about cohering as a community around the strategy so that the strategy can be implemented well over time, but we're also talking about making sure that the tools, the materials, the trainings that you're using all hang together with a tight internal logic so that there's a shared vision that is executed with all of the materials being used for kids in that particular community. And then H, hardwire. So often in education, we expect educators to be superheroes, and of course they are. But it is so important that you systematize the improvements that are happening so that what you do every day doesn't depend on someone being a superhero. It is part of the system. It is part of the routine that they're working in. And so in all of these systems that are succeeding at these very high rates, we see an effort to codify learning and embed these effective instructional practices, these effective assessment practices, these effective improvement practices into daily operations so that the system can hum along and improve as one coherent system.
That is exceedingly helpful and really paints a picture for everyone who's listening about the depth and level of systemic effort that was made here. I want to call out when Celeste was sharing just now, it reminded me of what I read about Richmond as well. So, Celeste, you talked really about the incredible nature of your team and everybody buying in and working hard together. And when you read about Richmond, Jason, I read specifically about how in tune with your team you were as well. Talk to us a little bit about Richmond's story. And if you can draw parallels too to what Celeste was sharing, like I did, feel free. But also tell us what was unique about Richmond that you think had it rise to the level that CPRL was so excited about the progress.
Well, first, I just have to say, Celeste, my teachers and principals are pretty dope too, so we might have to fight for the title. Second, I stopped reading what was on Facebook a long time ago. I just thought it was better for my mental health. But third, look, I taught math. I have done a lot of education work in the math area, and so literacy was not a particular strength of mine, and so I really did lean on others to help guide me in that area. And several years ago, I received an email from some of our best literacy coaches and teachers, and the email basically said, "Hey, we've been trying this foundational skills curriculum on the DL, And I know it's not the district one, but it's working and the teachers like it. And so we wanted to know, could we pilot it more broadly? And so again, since this really wasn't my area of expertise, I said, sure, let's get together, show me everything that you have found, bring your data. And so we met in the library of one of our elementary schools, and they had like a 60 slide deck that they had prepared with data and all kinds of other great information. And it was super compelling. And so I said, look, let's try this. Let's pilot it in a few places where there are folks who are excited to do it, and let's see what the data says. And that's what we did, and the data was great. And perhaps as important, teachers were really excited, and they felt um, that the new curriculum was much easier to implement, and they felt more effective as teachers. And so then we decided to go full scale, and that's what we've been doing now for 2 years. And the results have been really, really powerful, as you noted. So um, yeah, I think listening to your best folks on the ground doing the work really is so essential, and we would not be where we are today were it not for them.
There's a really powerful message here, both about the importance of leaders listening to their teachers and also teachers advocating for what is best for kids, right? This is the story that you're telling here, Jason, at a high level. And it really speaks to how a theme that I've seen in this podcast from superintendents specifically is about how leadership really works. It's not this like top down black box, nobody knows what's happening in there, but Celeste named it too. Transparency and humility really goes a long way in building trust with your community and attaining the outcomes that everybody is aiming to attain. So I appreciate both of you naming that forthright and like calling that out very early on. And it also speaks volumes to you as individuals, and how willing you are to like look inside yourself and really value what your community values and what your kids need. So I don't want folks listening to conflate humility and listening to your teachers with like a lack of purpose. Like you have very deep purpose. You are very driven towards the outcomes that you've achieved and what your kids deserve. So thank you for that. I'm sure your communities are even more thankful, but I just feel compelled to say thank you for that as I'm listening to you both share.
Thank you.
You know, there's a lot of debate, speaking of teacher autonomy, there's a lot of debate in the education field about teacher autonomy versus curricular coherence. And sometimes teachers feel like a structured curriculum takes away their voice. How does this research address that tension? And how does your boots on the ground experience address that tension? I'll let whoever wants to jump in first answer that.
I'm happy to. Um, my experience has been that when you have when you have taken the time to explain the why behind the instructional materials, why they're important, why they will actually make a difference for kids, and particularly low-income kids and other young people who are furthest from opportunity. Uh, Teachers, by and large, are willing um, to go with it. And again, I think I was in a unique situation in that the drive to adopt this curriculum really did come from our best folks. So there was sort of a already baked in sense of ownership. And I would say I have worked to explain, though, to others who weren't here when all that happened, that everybody doing whatever they want to do and having 1,000 flowers bloom, in theory, sounds wonderful, but in reality, really is not the best thing for kids, and that no single teacher, myself included, is going to be able to do all the research and all the background that you need to do to come up with the best possible curriculum. And so we have had those discussions, and I do think that has gone a long way to help folks understand. And also, ultimately, they're seeing success. And I think that's critical. Every teacher wants to be successful. I've never met a teacher who gets up in the morning and is like, you know what? Today, I really want my kids to fail. But lots of teachers struggle, and lots of teachers have other things in their lives that make it hard for them to succeed and so on. And so once we've shown, look, if you go down this path, if you really take the training seriously, if you follow these key practices, your kids will be successful. And then guess what? It happens. Then we see really high uptake, and that is really what I think changes the picture long term.
JT, you know what's so funny? When I'm listening to you speak, um, it's really aligned to, the way I'm thinking. I always remembered how it was to be a teacher and have to create curriculum. Like, I literally created all my literacy curriculum, and I thought I was fantastic. But I know for a fact that there were some students who I could not reach, and it's because I didn't get my master's in curriculum development. And so when I introduced this curriculum to teachers, I always put on my teacher hat and was like, guys, I think I was a good teacher, but I would have been amazing if I had a curriculum, right? Because now I'm not, if I create the curriculum, then I have to modify the curriculum. That now you have the curriculum, right? So all you have to do now, you can make this minor modifications. You're not doing every single thing. And I think if we put on our teacher hat, if we remind teachers like what we're doing is to make you like just work smarter, right? We don't want you spending, I used to spend my whole weekend creating one lesson, right? And we don't want that. And I think my first brave pilots, when they saw the fact that, wait, you don't want us to like write a new lesson plan. You just want us to annotate this last lesson plan with the specific modifications that we're going to make for children. They were like, okay. So I think it's really about understanding why we did this, right? And how does it like benefit teachers and students and leaders in general? And I think that was the shift. I always try to remember like what was hard about being a teacher and try to make it easier as a superintendent and what was hard about being a principal and what type of support would I have loved from my superintendent when I was a principal and what type of support would I have loved when I was a teacher from my principal. And that's why I think we lead. And that's what we're doing with this curriculum, when we're talking about launching a district-wide curriculum. Like, what would you have wanted? And I would have loved this when I was a teacher with the right superintendent and the right support.
Yeah, if I could just add 100%. And, we talk a lot about teachers feeling or being treated as the professionals that they are. And one of the things I've talked with teachers about is, look, for example, teaching reading is really, really hard to do it well. And acknowledging that, I actually think professionalizes the act of teaching reading. Just because you know how to read doesn't mean you can teach reading. And because it's really, really hard, we need to use the very best curricula to help us do that, in the same way that you wouldn't want a doctor operating on you who doesn't have a very clear roadmap and lots of training on how to do that operation. You don't want them to come in and be like, I think I'm pretty good. I've got a new way to do a heart transplant. I'm just gonna try it out. Like, that's insanity. And truly, I think teaching kids to read is just as complicated and scientifically complex as doing surgery. And so we have to have a really clear research-based roadmap to do it.
You two have hit on the themes that I would say when we look across the research. One that's very interesting, Superintendent Terry, when I think about you teaching, and I think about the many, many districts that go beyond the 12 that are in this particular project where we're doing research or support for the use of high quality curriculum. One interesting thing we see in many of the districts is that the teachers that are most positive about the change are the more veteran teachers. And it's the earlier teachers who have more questions or concerns. Our hypothesis that we're trying to learn more is partly because when they were training to be a teacher, what they were learning in their graduate school experience may have been, or their undergraduate experience may have been more around lesson planning and lesson design and things like that. But it's interesting that those folks who are in the field and who have been doing the job for a long time, in many of the districts that we work in, tend to more immediately see the benefit. And I do think this ties exactly to what you were saying, Superintendent Kamras, about the professionalizing aspect. It's not just doctors. All professions have a set of standard work and knowledge base that they work from. And the practitioners of that profession are not expected to pool all knowledge across all work settings to figure out the best tools. There are folks doing that work that deliver that knowledge base back to the people who are doing the work, and the people doing the work are expected to maintain their standard of practice so that they can use the best available tools. And so many teachers deserve and want to be seen as a professional. And so this actually provides the set of knowledge and resources and tools that's required to elevate the work in that particular way. It also, when I think about my teaching, and I was thinking about this when you were speaking, Superintendent Terry, and I think about this a lot when we think about that cohere. The other thing that's really helpful with these materials is not just that it allows our teachers to tailor effective practices, but it allows them to work across boundaries. You don't have to go to, professional learning sessions that really aren't about what you're doing in your classroom. And then after you do professional learning, figure out what to do with it once you go back to your curriculum. You don't have to spend hours and hours trying to, and often being unable to, coordinate with special education teachers, with your tutors, with your out of school time providers, because it's already clear what's happening in classrooms and what the shared curriculum is that everyone is working from. And so this ability for whole teams of professionals to work together in service of kids' learning is another thing that is afforded when everyone's working from the same base of standard work. Again, something that happens in so many other professions, and that the curriculum brings to our education space. And finally, I'll just say, it's with that shared base of work and with that shared understanding of practice that you really can systematically assess what people are doing so that you can improve that over time.
Ooh, Liz, you do such a great job of tying together. You should have a podcast. You did a really wonderful job, though, of highlighting all the complexity of this. I want to stick with you for a minute because as I learned about CPRL, which was a little before this podcast, I was really curious about how the organization sat in the law center at Columbia. Can you talk a little bit about the zoom out to policy and how this work ties to really what we should as a society, as a country, be thinking about, what we've learned from leaders like Celeste and Jason about how we can codify some of this reliance on coherence of high quality instructional materials. Like, talk a little bit about that and how CPRL is trying to bring this to policymaking.
Yeah. Well, almost every week I get the question of why is CPRL, when they're so focused on education and institutions that affect kids, why are we in the law school? So I'm glad it came on a Monday morning. It means
starting the week off right.
Got the question down for the week. So I'll speak to that briefly because it does go to what we were just saying, which is a lot of what lawyers spend their time on is trying to help folks figure out how to work as effectively as possible together to achieve their goals. And so they see lots of problems as problems of systems. And you have to reorganize the way the systems function in order to achieve the outcomes that you're aiming for. And so for us, what we're trying to do in the education space is attack all of these issues where you're not seeing all kids learning, or you're only seeing some kids learning, or you're not seeing the improvement that you anticipated, as systems problems and system design problems. And that's why when we speak about curriculum, the answer is not the curriculum. The answer is, how do you build the systems to help people use this tool well? And a lot of our work goes up and down the vertical spine of all of the nested systems that fit together to make sure that kids learn. And so In these particular cases, we're looking a lot at a teacher working with a particular child, fit within a teacher working with a particular classroom, fit within a teacher working in that classroom in a school, and the school working in a district, and their policy implications and implications of enabling conditions at every level. And then there are all of these different ways that the actors work together to achieve their outcomes that are so important. And that's why with the tool, yes, with this particular project, we started with the tools, with reach, with our resources are essential, but we see these curriculum as kind of a entryway or a doorway into broader systems change, because if you don't orient your entire systems activity about how to use these tools well, they probably won't work at the same level that you hear in Richmond and that you hear in District 18. There'll be tools that, may be implemented in some places or not others, or to some effect, but not the full effect. And so we see this as a systems design problem, and that's what landed us in the law school at the start of this journey.
Good thing you got it out of the way just now to make sure you do. And listen, at a time right now where policy and practice are sometimes even more the bigger gap than ever, you have on the ground evidence from schools like our districts like Richmond and districts like District 18, and it is very clear how this systemic change is impacting. I want to touch on one more topic before we wrap up our episode. And Celeste, I'm gonna come to you because one of the things that really heartened me as I read the details of what happened in your community was how you brought families in. And I would love for you to just expand upon that for the audience members who are in districts today, because I think this is often a desired outcome, but not always an achieved outcome when trying to initiate systemic or significant change in a community. So, what happened at District 18 and how did you do it?
I want to, it happened kind of funny. I was at a big district block party in August. And I remember talking to some parents and talking about this curriculum. I'm like, I know you've heard about it. I know. And they were like, no. And at that point, I felt really bad because I was like, we sent these newsletters out. I've talked to parents, I've done virtual calls. What I realized, I wasn't really on the ground where I needed to be. And so what I did was I made sure that for that first year that I went to at least three major school engagements. And I just got up there and sold the pitch. But not only did I sell it, I literally had office hours. So I had office hours in the morning and I had office hours in the afternoon, because what I said to myself was like, I have to go and I have to figure out how can I schedule my time so that parents can know what's going on. And in those office hours, I really found the places where our curriculum wasn't doing what we needed to do, right? And I think because parents saw me respond to what they were saying during those office hours, that I really got parents really involved and invested. They knew that they said to me, look, with the Wit and Wisdom curriculum, we're not seeing enough modifications for our special needs students. They knew that, guess what? The next month, that I'd be talking about what were the modifications we were doing. So I think really making sure that I had access to all different parent voices was the thing to do. I really couldn't just count on the fact that we were sending letters, that we had some meetings. I need to make sure that every single school, they saw me and they felt me. And it really started from that little District 18 block party where I had just asked a couple of parents what they thought, and they really didn't have any thoughts. And so that to me was really how it happened. It was kind of just like really organic, but then it became a structure. To your point, Dr. Chu, and I know you don't want us to call you doctor, but I feel like you worked hard enough, so I'm calling you doctor.
Right?
You worked hard enough. To your point, I think once we found our gap, we then created a system and a structure so that we can then listen to parent voices and then act on it.
Yeah. Thank you for putting a fine point on that. It is wild to me that we're already kind of hitting our almost end of the conversation time. I feel like I could talk about this all systems go forever. Also, just deep dive even further into the work happening at CPRL and the individual work happening in your districts. But maybe for a second episode, maybe a follow-up episode.
Bring some principals. We can bring some principals and teachers and we can kind of do, so you really find out if Jason, what I'm saying is true. So bring some
Right. We're gonna pressure
Love
test
it.
it. That's the next
pressure
episode.
test.
I love it. But also with the way that you're speaking, I feel so confident that the story will be, to use the word, coherent. And I'd be thrilled to have that follow-up episode. To wrap us up, I'll ask my same final question, but the way that I'll ask it is a little bit different than I normally do. I normally ask, what advice would you give a teacher starting their career today? I think for you, I will change it and ask, what advice would you give a leader who wants to follow in your footsteps, Jason and Celeste? And then Liz, I'll end with you with a different question.
I'm gonna sort of steal what Celeste said, which is because I just agree with it so much, which is get your hands dirty. Like get up all into the nitty-gritty of this work. It's not something that you can do from afar. Don't be afraid to say, I don't know, and seek out great folks in your division and beyond to help you along the way. But yeah, just get in there, like read the books and the curriculum, try the lessons yourselves, talk to teachers. Like you have to just be super, super dirty in the best possible way on this work.
I mean, I'm going to steal Jason's answer, right? I literally, he said it all. You got to get your hands dirty. And you have to not be afraid to make a difficult choice. Remember, I told you earlier on that we had been using a different curriculum, right? And if I had said to myself, the easier move would have just been to stick with that curriculum because it was one of the three vetted ones. But I had to make a difficult choice. And I made that difficult choice, to Jason's point, by being on the ground. And when I was on the ground and seeing the impact of that curriculum not having the impact that I wanted it to have, I had to make a difficult choice. So I think be ready to make a difficult choice, get your hands dirty and listen and get some smart people. People who are smarter than you. Like my deputy superintendent, she is smarter than me, right? I got some principals who are smarter than me. I put them around the table. I got some parents who are smarter than me. I put them around the table and we talk and we debate. And I think, you got to get those people around the table with you and people who think a little differently than you, right? So that you know that you're making a really smart decision.
Ooh, these are really solid answers. Liz, I know you kind of overviewed the REACH framework and that was really powerful. I hope folks were really paying attention, but they can also find more about that framework in the All Systems Go report. But as a final question for you, I would ask, what do you think early change leaders need to understand about systems level change? From your seat, you have a really nice view of that. So what would you tell them?
Well, I guess to pick up on some of the themes already, it's hard and complex, and if you keep implementation quality at the fore, you probably will go for systems change. It is very, very hard to get all people in a system, all people in a school system, all teachers in a school system to be doing a particular thing at the highest levels of quality. And so if you don't think about this as an adoption problem, but you think about this as an implementation challenge and a change journey that you're on in order to get all teachers implementing their curriculum as effectively as possible, you probably will end up engaging in systems change because you're going to need to support those folks differently. You're going to need to provide joint learning activities in different ways. You're going to need leaders who are doing what Jason and Celeste are doing, really engaging with folks on the ground to figure out what's working and what's not. You're going to need to monitor that and adjust. And you're going to need to bring the whole community along, changing the materials that they all work together to the best effect. So I think if you keep your eye on high quality implementation in every single classroom, chances are as you work toward that, you will be engaging in systems change.
The three of you have started my week off exactly right. I feel incredibly heartened and buoyed by the work that CPRL has done to illuminate really high quality outcomes that we should be seeing in more places and spaces. But to your point, Liz, not easy work to do this systems level change. I want to thank you, Liz, excuse me, for bringing these stories to light. And I want to thank Jason and Celeste for doing the incredibly hard work. Um, in their communities that have led to these incredible outcomes. I look forward to staying in touch and learning more about the great things happening, and maybe even, like you said, spotlighting some of the folks with their feet on the ground implementing this in the classroom. So thank you everybody for coming on the Learning Can't Wait podcast. It has been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you
Great
so
to-
much.
And thank you everybody for tuning in today. Thanks for listening to the Learning Can't Wait podcast. If you like what you heard, please rate, review, and share this episode. Be the first to know when we have a new episode by subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have a suggestion for an episode, email us at podcast@fullmindlearning.com.